to me, one of the most important properties you buy is your first property, because it's the property that's going to propel you up the property ladder. So many people I know have made so much wealth through buying, rebuying, selling, flipping, all of that. And so the first property he buys really needs to be one of the most important that he ever buys, right? It needs to be one that's going to give him great capital growth, good yield if he rents it out. It's going to have a reason to hold its value. If economy crashes, it's going to be near a village or a beach, or a reason why people are going to want to buy it and rent it, right? So I'd be saying to him, he's going to want someone to advise him on what the right property to buy. And then not only what the right property to buy is, but what the right price to pay is, right? Because we all know buying property comes down to what you pay for it, not what you sell it for, right? And so it's those two factors. Also, is he going to know where to look, what to look for? Most people buy with emotion. You don't want to buy with emotion. You want to make sure you buy with your head, right? And so I think it's all those factors that someone like that would need someone to guide them into buying the right property. Because also 85% of what we buy is off market. So he's missing out on a huge part of the marketplace.
Yeah, I was going to say that because typically if that particular individual probably goes on realestate.com onto Domain and sees, there's properties for sale in New Farm. Yeah, why New Farm? Oh, because I like the Khalil Hotel. Yep. And so New Farm's a good area.
So typical. I heard this the other day.
And so, but he says, well, that's the reason I'm going to buy there, and it goes to those two platforms, as opposed to coming to you. You're saying that you might be able to buy or find properties that aren't actually listed.
Well, here's what will happen.
Those two things.
He'll go down the way you were saying. He'll end up going to 5 auctions. He'll miss out on all of those 5 auctions because he's just going to have to be a bidder at an auction, a number. His pre-approval might run out. He'll have to get pre-approved again. He'll constantly miss out. He'll then be frustrated. He'll end up overpaying for something, right? If he came to us, we'd sit down and we'd talk about a strategy. Is this to live in or is it an investment, right? Where are you prepared to live? These are the top 3 areas we think are the best. This is what you should have, and these are non-negotiables, right? Depends on the area, whether it should have parking, a balcony, whatever. And then we'd go out to the marketplace and we'd find everything that exists. On market, off market, pre-market, post-market, price reduced, whatever exists in the marketplace. We'll go and shortlist all the best properties. We'll then do all the due diligence around them, come up with a valuation, right? Come up with what it will rent for. Put a strategy in place to get it for the cheapest price possible and get a place a lot quicker and a lot smarter and a lot cheaper than he will on his own.
The Reserve Bank puts its interest rate up, then all the lenders put their interest rates up too because money costs them more, which means me, the consumer, I'm going to have even less money.
Yes.
On the example you just gave, well, what is the general reaction and or behaviour of the consumer? So do they just sort of put their hands in their pocket and say, I'm not going to spend any more money, or do they go and get another job, or do they come out of being a mother at home if they maybe just had a child 6 months ago, a year ago, and go back to work?
So in Australia, it's worth remembering that the worst thing that can happen to you is to lose your home. So people are absolutely determined not to find themselves in a scenario where their home can be repossessed. And they will do all the things that you mentioned if they can to avoid it. The first thing you do is cut back on your discretionary spending. You cut back on the non-essentials, the travel and the fun stuff, and you batten down the hatches financially. But you may have to go and get a second job. You may have to borrow from your parents, for example. Some people have been in that situation. People will do whatever it takes to keep their homes. And so for people with mortgages, rising rates and financial stress, they hurt really badly, but they will make a lot of sacrifices to avoid having to leave that family home. Every cycle has its winners and losers. The challenge is how the RBA gets us through this. If they can engineer a soft landing, it's a challenge. People are suggesting it's still possible that we may be able to slow down the economy and rein in inflation without tipping too many people over the edge. And that's what you have to hope for.
Globally, investors love Australian mortgages because they just outperform every other mortgage in the world. And they have done for the last 30 years. Our arrears and delinquency rates in Australia relative to the rest of the world are like dream time. It's so good. We are so good at protecting our mortgages as individuals relative to the rest of the world. And that's got a lot to do with our psyche about, this is my home, I've got to protect it no matter what. And this has been sort of delivered to us from our parents, from our grandparents. But over the last few years, we've got to cohort of people in this country, say from 20 to 30, who have probably taken the position that they're never going to be able to afford a home. Is this an opportunity perhaps that all those doomers, not the boomers, but the doomers, who felt as though they're never going to get into the housing cycle, never going to buy a property, and basically therefore have dismissed it? Do you think this is an entry point for those individuals? And what would you be saying to them? Should they be paying attention and maybe starting to save a deposit?
I hope that challenge for young people changes, right? It's not equitable. It's not fair. The ultra low rates that we've had have led to what they call an everything bubble globally. And it has meant that those who own assets have become far wealthier, and those who didn't own assets, who are usually young people, have become less wealthy on a relative basis. And you need to remedy that over the long term, right? That's not okay. No one wants their grandchildren to be much poorer than they were at the same age. That's not cool. So we do want to see it change. So it's a great time, I think, to start saving and thinking about this as part of your future. You don't need to rush in. And that's a good thing, right? FOMO is terrible in the property market. It's dreadful. That's when people massively overpay, particularly at auction. You do have time on your hands as rates rise. You've got plenty of time to watch how this play out. And you can save during that period. As rates rise, you also get more on your interest. So you can put some money in the bank, put some money aside, start saving, keep looking around, see if you find a bargain. It'd be wonderful.
So when I was 20, the first thing you did when you turned 20 or you graduated from university, you might have got a job, which in my case happened. And the first thing I did was I bought a property, much cheaper in those days. And is it a matter of the 20 to 30-year-old cohort of people today have simply parked the idea of buying it in their 20s and perhaps will end up buying it in their 30s and 40s? They're just going to be later in the cycle, just like they get married later, just like they have kids later. Is it just a simple matter of transferring these acquisitions and getting into the property cycle to another period in your life when you're earning more money? Perhaps you've got a partner who can help you borrow the money to buy the property. It might be a period where you're thinking of settling down, so you think you need to have the security of a property. Whereas when you're 20s, it's a little bit more fluid. And is that something that you have experienced? Do you think that's part of the solution? In other words, don't rush out there and buy something. Just hang.
I think we hope that's true. Once you're in your late 30s, particularly if you have children, one of you is working part-time, your expenses really grow with childcare and so on. It's really difficult to accumulate a deposit during that period if you haven't accrued a deposit before. And that's what's getting really hard. If you weren't saving during your 20s and 30s, then to be able to buy something in your 40s is going to get hard. If you spent that time saving and investing and you've been building up some wealth in some capacity, whether it's in shares or in something else, and you have that to invest and put down as a deposit, fantastic, right? You're well set. If you spent that time having lots of fun and not been saving, it's going to be much more difficult for you. There's a lot of other people who have also been hoping for an opportunity to buy a property at some point. So it's still a competitive market, but we do hope everyone has the opportunity to live somewhere secure, right? We don't want a housing crisis in this country.
So what you're sort of saying to me then is that for those people in that 20 to 30 range, it's one thing to accept that you're not going to buy a property perhaps in that 20 to 30 year period, in that 10-year period over 20 to 30, but it doesn't mean you can go and spend everything you earn. You've got to start saving and perhaps investing in various marketplaces in order to build those savings at a faster rate than you would otherwise get if you're getting deposit interest at a bank. But take the stress away from yourself, take the pressure off your shoulders and stop thinking, why haven't I got a property? Because mum and dad have been telling me I should have bought a property when I was 25 or 26. Take the pressure off, but at the same time, have a strategy to build some, let's call it wealth or a deposit by investing in other asset classes. And by the way, these days it could be just putting money in the bank. I've saved up with my partner, did a deposit, we've got the loan approved by whoever it is you're borrowing your money from. There's a house we really like. Should I wait or should I go and bid? And if I bid and I buy, am I running a risk that if I paid $1 million, that in 6 months' time it's going to be worth, just take your example, maybe 850, 900? I mean, what should I do?
Well,
what would you say?
I'll put my money where my mouth is. My daughter's first year at uni. She's working a job. Can't believe the wages that she's getting as a part-time employee. I mean, I can't. That's another thing. I just can't get over what people are getting paid these days. She's 18 years of age, and I used to work at Luna Park when I was at uni, and I remember I used to get like 50, 60 bucks. You know what I mean?
I used to work $20 a day, $25 a day.
Yeah.
That's what I was earning.
But now, because of this shortage of staff, you know, my daughter's coming back. She studies full-time doing law commerce, yet she still is able to earn $1,000 a week in hospitality, right? I just can't understand that concept. But anyway, that's beside the point. What I'm getting at is, she said to me, hey, do you think I should buy real estate? I said, I think so. I think you should buy it. She goes, and when do you think I should buy, Daddy? Is the price going to keep dropping? I said, I'd probably buy between now and June next year. And the reason why, Maddie, is when the market picks up, it picks up sooner than what we think. 35 years in this business, Mark, it gets us by surprise. What happens is you wake up and you think, hang on a second, this should have sold for $1 million. It's gone for 1.1. But guess what? You've already missed the bottom.
Yeah.
Right? Because the only way you know the market has bottomed is when the market goes up, because you can look back and say, that was the bottom back then.
Yeah.
By that stage, it's too late. You're buying more than the bottom.
So I think what you're saying, Tom, is that don't try and pick the bottom.
No.
But try to get in on the way down to the bottom, which is in your colourful expression, 6 p.m. on the clock. Don't try and pick 6 p.m. because it doesn't really matter if you pick 7 p.m. or 5 p.m. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You've got to be either on the way when it's on the way up or just before it gets to the bottom. If you sit around waiting to get to the bottom, you're going to be quite disappointed. But even if you pick 7 on the clock, it's still not too bad because it's probably on its way up. So basically, if you've got the deposit, you've got to be happy. You feel like your income is safe, your wages are safe. You've got the approval, and you find the right joint, and it doesn't look like it's overs. Buy. And what you're also saying, I think, Tommy, is that maybe look at those properties that need a bit of love and care, because the ones that are already done, because how expensive it is to get renovations, what a pain in the neck it is to do renovations, how unreliable, all the trades have become because of, all sorts of reasons, sickness, weather, inability to get, inventory and all those sorts of things. Maybe you might be able to sort of play the market a bit and buy something that needs a bit of TLC. But don't do it now. Wait. Just buy it, rent it. When do you think a buyer's agent is probably most relevant?
I actually think a buyer's agent's most relevant depending on the individual if they're time poor. So people that don't have time to dedicate to the research, it doesn't matter whether the market's strong or weak, you can get it wrong if you're just not going to invest the time into it. So when it's weak, it's a bit easier for those that will invest the time because the market's not moving as quickly, there's not as much pressure. When it's really a hot market, even if you do want to put time into it, sometimes you just get pushed and pulled through that market so quickly you make mistakes. Yeah. So I think hot markets, it's critical, and soft markets, if you're just not putting the time in, you need that help. Or if you're in an area you don't know, if you're investing out of interstate or out of your area, very easy to get it wrong. I
remember when you launched your book, I don't know how long ago, it was a long time ago anyway, and you were talking about regional versus metro, investing in regional markets as opposed to metro markets, and you talked about the higher yields you get, rental yields I'm talking about in regional markets compared to metro markets, and the reasons why, which all made sense. Then you talked about the lower capital gains in regional markets relative to the higher capital gains that you ordinarily would get in metro markets, which all made sense at the time. But of course, during the COVID period, everybody wanted to move regional. So we got is there a different view today on that sort of hypothesis? Because regional markets, forget about what's happening at the moment, but regional markets did quite well for both in rental yields and capital gains over the past 3 years.
Correct. They did well, but they didn't do as well as the capitals still. So when you look at your regional markets compared to your capitals, we've done a bit of analysis recently because, we get challenged on things, especially when you put in a book, you get challenged on it eventually. We wanted to look at how that actually worked in probably what's been the strongest regional market we've seen in over a decade. And we still saw most capital cities had double the growth in the same sort of state as what the regional areas did. So anyone that invested regionally has made money, but they would have made more if they'd looked at the capitals. So it's been good times, but you've still got to do that benchmarking if it's purely an investment decision.
Is it because you're worried that the interest rate changes we've had to date haven't actually hit us in the back pocket? Is that the reason you're starting to think we won't normalise for a long time? At least 6 to 12 months. We won't normalise for that period because people haven't really yet felt the effect of the interest rate rises and what future rate rises we might be also in for.
I think that there is an element of that, yes. I also think that that people are a bit nervous because the market's grown so much. And remember that we're having this conversation based on the fact that people bought properties 3-4 years ago and some of them have doubled in value.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're talking about the market coming back. We're not talking about the market tanking.
Yeah.
We're talking about the market coming back another, potentially 5, even 10% maybe, possibly. I'm not talking about the market really coming back 30%, something crazy like that. I think that people are attracted to the type of home that they want to buy. I also feel like there's no point trying to pick the market. Me as a buyer right now, when I'm in the market to buy, I'm not looking for whether the market's good today or better in 6 months' time. If the right house comes up that I want to buy for me and for my family's future and it's important to me, I'm going to buy that house.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pick whether the market's going up or whether it's going down. I just want to buy the house that I want. If I'm an investor, then I'm being considerate about where my investment dollar is going to go. Now, I'll talk about that for a sec because rents are rising.
Yeah.
More people are moving back into the rental market. Our borders are opening up. We're going to have more people coming to the country. There is an element of the conversation to say that, hey, the market actually might improve and it might get better. And this is the reason why, because more people are coming. Even though rates are going up, they were ridiculously low when the market was booming. And that's one of the reasons why the market boomed. People could borrow more money. There was confidence. There was a shitload of stimulus put into the economy and there was money everywhere. I'm doing a lot of charity auctions right now, heaps of charity auctions. Every charity auction I'm doing is making more money than they were previously.
Really?
It's really interesting. Yep. I did the Children's Cancer Institute on Saturday night. We raised over $1.7 million. Previously, I think our best was about 1.314. Almost every charity auction I'm doing right now, they're making more money. That means that big business and corporates and high net wealth families are donating more. There must be more money around, right?
Well, there was more money pumped into the system, therefore there must be money around. So what most people don't get is when the government throws money at a system, and we're talking about 250 billion plus was thrown at the system, like that's a lot of dough. It ends up in our pockets somehow.
Yep.
Or some of our pockets, not everybody's pockets obviously, but it does make its way into our accounts. And it either goes down to pay your mortgage or it just gets put into a savings account. And then, so therefore it has to be spent. But it's not evenly distributed. That's the problem. You're in the east suburbs area, which is sort of like pretty ritzy in terms of pricing. Probably doesn't represent all of Sydney. Definitely doesn't represent all of Australia. If if you're on the monopoly board and you've got land on a community chest and they just said, look, collect $2 million, where would you buy now? Would you buy in Sydney Metro or would you buy regional? What would you do with the $2 million? A young Tammy now.
I would try to buy something in the eastern suburbs.
Why is that?
I just think, in terms of a capital growth point of view, if you can, get something, I would look to be buying something unique. Obviously, if you could get like a terrace of some sort, great, because you're getting a bit of land.
Let's say $3 million. Could you buy in Paddington? $3
million, yeah, you can buy in Paddington. You could probably get something, one just sold actually with parking for $3,080,000, which I thought was a great buy. If you could get a terrace in Paddington with parking, absolute ideal. Put tenants in, it's great capital growth, good little land holding, and obviously they're not building any more terraces, so you're buying something unique. wouldn't advise to be buying something in an area, that's dense with a lot of high rises, because your property is not as unique. You always kind of look for unique properties.
Tammy, you're a buyer's agent. What's your personal story in terms of buying property?
So my first, purchase of a property was with my husband, was my then boyfriend, but he's a real estate agent, has been for the last 15 years. We bought a little off-market 2-bedroom apartment in Bellevue Hill, a little Art Deco block. It needed work. I think every purchase we have made has been something that needs work. We obviously, renovated that, sold it, and then a few years later bought a, really old terrace in Paddington. It was like a 50-year untouched terrace, which, most people walk through and just find disgusting, but we actually get excited about those properties. I love being able to buy what we call the ugly duckling and then actually spend money and transform it into something amazing.
Is that old story, the worst house in the best street?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I find like I wouldn't want to pay for someone else's renovation. I'd much prefer to do it myself.
Very interesting.
Although at the moment with building costs and shortage of supplies and shortage of labour, a lot of people are just going for something that's done.
And good enough.
Yeah, for sure.
What is your prognosis for real estate in Brisbane?
That's a good question. There is a lot of negativity in the market at the moment, but never in my career have I ever had a buyer turn around and say, I'm glad I waited to purchase. Never. So
That's a good point.
Genuinely. So I think if you're in a position where you can buy, just do as much as you can to put yourself in a position of strength. Be ready and prepared to offer immediately and competitively, and also be willing to make compromise. Because we see time and time again, buyers who come into the market at the start of their buyer cycle, they'll find 2 or 3 properties that really suited them, but then they'll miss out on them because they don't think they found the right property, and 3 months later they say, should have bought that property. You have to be willing to make compromise.
So that means meet the market.
Meet the market.
Can you just share with me your first acquisition, your first foray into the property market?
Yeah, I can, because I remember it very, very clearly. I had a heavily pregnant wife, and selling real estate, it takes a lot of my time. So there were so many requests from my wife, Bri, come through this home, and I never saw any of them. And it got to the point where she was about 30 days away from giving birth, and she just said, you get to this home, we're buying it. So I turned up, registered, and the first bid that got thrown out exceeded my budget by about $50,000. So you get in the car, and I knew I was going to cop it, and I did. So I bring up realestate.com, found a home. I was like, auctions in half an hour, let's go here. Got there late. I literally walked through the backyard, under the house. It was a Queenslander that had been raised but hadn't been built in under. Walked through the house into the backyard. He gave me my ticket, and I just stood in the backyard with my hand up until I bought it. $687,500, and I think that was a big price at the time for that home. It was a tiny, tiny workers' cottage. I just did not care. I just did not want to deal with the pain. But a great learning curve, because it's so funny. I see that every week. Every week, I'll see someone walk through the door, and it's a pregnant wife and a husband with his head in his hand, and I feel it.
And did you do well out of it?
No, not really. Look, I didn't lose money. I made probably $30,000, which allowed me to leverage into my next home, which we built, which is really nice, and we're really happy there. So it gave me enough to take that next step within, I think we were in that home for 3 years.